Okay, so I kind of wanted to talk about. Maybe I'm talking about him a bit too much these days, but it's really hard not to jump into this subject when you talk about esoteric mythology, occult mythology. You're going to come into contact with the essential gods, and it doesn't matter what culture, right? Like all of the gods show themselves in throughout all of the cultures, whether it's Egyptian culture, Babylonian, Greek, Roman. You can even talk about Aztec and Incans have different versions of the same gods. It's cross-cultural. So, but these are the essential forces that kind of dictate what happens here on Earth. And right now we are going through a time where this particular one has a lot of sway, probably more so than normal, although he never really doesn't matter. And it's obviously Saturn. And you only have a few signs here. Maybe I got a little too ambitious, but I didn't feel like changing anything. I just kind of wanted to get this out there. And it's talking about Saturn, who he is, and what is his opposition to, people, the individual. So first and foremost, I've talked about him plenty times. Who is Saturn? I have the most flattering picture of Saturn right there. That's an old painting, I think, from the 1600s. It's a Spanish painting of Saturn who is, as Kronos, eating his children. But who is Saturn? Primarily, he's known as the Lord of Time and Karma. He's the one who controls time. Typically in astrology, whenever Saturn starts to go retrograde, you start to realize you have more time than normal, right? But not in the sense that you feel like overwhelmed and overjoyed for the time, because Saturn is also known as a malefic. So anytime he gives you more time, it's really just to work more. Whatever house he's in says what it is. And he's also the Lord of Karma. So he has the ability to ensure that your karma is paid. He has the ability to ensure that you pay someone else's karma. He is here to give you, to ensure that the consequences for actions that were done are duly paid. Another thing of interesting to note is Saturn is the ruler of the weak and the infirm. If you are ever to pray to Saturn, you would have to actually find carrions, you would find rodents, rats, disgusting things, and offer those to him. He actually, because he's the Lord of Karma, and usually karma is associated with some kind of affliction. If you are debilitated, or if you are a cripple, if you are sick, weak, you end up being ruled under Saturn. And so if you ever were to act out of weakness, if you were ever to act because you were sick, if you were ever to act because you are the quote-unquote lesser being or of society, or the castaway of society, you would be acting with the spirit of Saturn, right? Because especially if it's malefic, and usually it is. He rules two signs. Most planets do, except for the sun and the moon. He's the ruler of Capricorn. Capricorn has to do with governments. It has to do with status. Your title is going to be found here. Your highest achievements, or just achieving whatsoever, is going to be associated with Capricorn. So all really good things. He's also the ruler of Aquarius. Which is, these are groups, human groups. Corporations would be the typical manifestation of Aquarius, or the 11th house. Technology. Aquarius is also known as the rebellious one, and Aquarius is also associated with equality, but more in a all for one for all, three musketeers sort of way is a better way of looking at it, though equality of all kinds, whether it's a great expression of it or a bad expression of it, that's what you're going to find there. So altogether, it doesn't sound too bad. I mean, this is why Saturn is, by the way, an endlessly fascinating, figure, because it's easy to like him before you really realize that you don't. So the two signs we're talking about are here. This is where the 10th sign would be with Capricorn. The 11th sign would be the Aquarius. Opposite of that is Cancer. Opposite of Aquarius is Leo. Cancer is ruled by the moon. So the moon represents people, the people. Like if you're looking at a nation's chart, the character of the people, how they feel, how they react to certain things, how safe they feel. That's going to be represented by the moon. It's not a rational end of things. There's nothing rational about the sign of Cancer. It's about safety, security. It's about our deepest values, maybe our darkest values too, because the fourth house is sort of our foundational element. But there's also where all the dark secrets are found. It's the reason why your family knows kind of the worst aspects of you, that type of thing. And of course he opposes Leo as well, which is ruled by the sun, and the sun represents the ego, the individual, your creative energy. And it's funny because he opposes both of them. Oppositions in astrology are not easily explained away by something like, goes against it. Oppositions in astrology are sort of precarious relationships because, after all, and I've talked about this before, the first house and the seventh house oppose each other, and that's represented by the self and your spouse, right? So, the spouse and the self, we love marriage and we think marriage is a good thing, but marriage itself has a bit of an opposing quality to it, and that opposing quality creates a bit of friction and a little bit of a war that goes on between the spouses, right? But you resolve those conflicts and you come together. But when the marriage gets really bad, you really are kind of at war with each other. And the same thing does happen with Saturn, opposing the sun, Saturn opposing the people, right? And it happens. It really, really, really happens. And you're kind of seeing it today a little bit with the governments the way they are. And a quick note about the relationship between the sun and the moon, by the way, is that the sun, by the way, is only masculine. It only gives off energy. It only expels. Masculinity, I've said this repeatedly, is about something that's generated within and it's expressed outward. That's exactly what the sun does. It generates all of its heat and its energy, within itself, and it only radiates. It does not receive. The sun does no such thing. It doesn't generate. It doesn't emit. What it does emit is only reflected by what it receives from the sun. So the moon, in order to even be seen, needs the sun. This is kind of the nature of masculinity and femininity and how it works with each other. And but it is fun at the same time too to note that Saturn, in terms of the institutions of this world, because that's what's represented in the 10th sign or the 10th house, and the 11th sign in the 11th house. These are very earthly oriented things. These are governments. These are your highest institutions, your highest achievements. These are the corporations that we work for, where you come together for a certain purpose, and while you're making that purpose, you're making some good money. Money is usually associated, your gains from your careers found in the 11th house, for example. But he opposes this, and because there is a relationship between government and its people, corporations and the individual, right? So why am I talking about? Why is Saturn important? Well, as I've just said, he's related to the most powerful institutions. When you're talking about when government starts to go awry, and very often it does. Very often, government ends up being an enemy to the people. In fact, and maybe I should have gone out of my way to find some pictures of this, but was that a bit of an interruption there? No. So as I was saying, he's related to our most powerful institutions. These are your governments. These are the things that have a say in everything that we do. And he also presides over the most important institutions with our corporations. Like our corporations, no matter how you look at it, when kind of reminds me of the great line from Mitt Romney when he was running for president back in 2012. Well, corporations are people too. Well, technically speaking, he's correct. He's in the 11th house, which is associated with Aquarius. That is where you find corporations, and it's really the corporations and the people within them. Now, at its highest aspect, corporations are really kind of filled with the group organizations where everyone understands what purpose that they're coming together for. They understand, that it's a shared purpose. And it's part and parcel why you get the all for one for all attitude. It's like with Aquarius being exactly opposite of the sun, there's a relationship there. At its most, when it's really healthy, there's an understanding that the individual is giving himself to this broader organization, but he's not sacrificing his individuality because the organization also has his own interests at heart. So that's when you end up having this all for one for all. I'm giving to you as you're giving to me because I'm also giving to myself, and I'm doing it for myself as much as I'm doing it for you. That's what happens when it's really healthy. When it's not healthy, corporations don't care about the individual. So today, for example, we know that corporations aren't healthy today. And we know that corporations have an adversarial relationship with people today. And so this kind of manifests itself when you work for a corporation and you have a lot of problems with what the corporation does. And the corporation kind of looks at you and says, let's find a way to get rid of this guy. Because I don't like him. I don't want to deal with him. I care more about controlling things. I care more about things that keep this ship going. Because Saturn is a very practical planet. He's all about practicality. He's kind of brings order to chaos, even though he loves chaos a bit. And these institutions are about maximizing the practicality of earthly ventures and affairs. That's again why Saturn rules these two. But again, it's all about that precarious relationship to the other side of it. It's all about this relationship of what Saturn does here in Aquarius with the corporations and the people. At its best, it's doing it because the people in it are collectively as individuals. Because remember, the sun is the individual, have come into this area, right? Oh boy, I'm getting necessary stuff. It's the nature of recording while you work, but. No, it's always got to keep in mind there's always this precarious relationship between organizations and organizations and the individual, governments and its people, right? It's a marriage, and corporations are actually perfectly good. Big organizations are perfectly good when everyone who's in it, all of the individuals in it, in the fifth house with the sun, understand that they're not giving up. They're not extinguishing their fire. They're not extinguishing their light. They're not extinguishing their sun. They're giving it to something better than themselves and bigger than themselves, but also for themselves, right? And that's because Saturn is not, Saturn, it might be opposite of the sun. Saturn in Vedic cultures is the enemy of the sun. In Vedic cultures, Saturn is the son of the sun, and he is not too thrilled with his father, or rather, he's here to enact the laws of the father, so to speak. But no, it's at its best, this works really well. At its worst, Saturn does what Saturn does worst and best. He becomes extremely limiting. As anyone who's worked for a corporation, you understand that you have a very strong limits to freedom of speech. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to do anything that isn't with what's good in the corporation's image, right? Which, by the way, does a good job of it. That's it. Like, you should be representing the corporation, right? It's like, and the corporation should be representing you, all for one for all. We all know it doesn't always happen, especially when corporations gobble up so much more power than they necessarily deserve. And that tends to happen because there is this sort of greedy element that that Saturn tends to get over time, where he starts to become a little insecure when he understands that his usefulness is starting to go away, and that there's going to be a new ruler that's going to come up, that's going to come from his children, and it's going to usurp him, and it's going to take him out of power, and he basically says, no, I don't want to do it, and I'm going to stop at nothing to prevent that from happening. It's sort of, this is actually speaks to the key points of his myth. But before I get to that, so again, Saturn's also important because we're entering into his age. We are leaving the age of Pisces, which is a Jupiterian age. It's about feminine truth. It's sort of the secret truths a little bit, because Pisces relates to the shadows of existence. Everything that was kind of missed. That's why, like, the big points of the age of Pisces are going to be, you really want to look at Gnosticism at that point. You really want to look at the Rosicrucians. You really want to look at Masons, Freemasons, the Jesuits, all of these secret societies that were trying to seek Christ in their own way. And, whether or not they came to the true truth is difficult to say, because Pisces is such a mysterious sign. It's that relation to Neptune. But anyway, we're leaving that age. We're entering into the age of Aquarius. It's the age that's associated with truth. It's associated kind of with the bare truth, so to speak. You're seeing a lot of that today with a lot of the other parts of Aquarius, which is technology we talked about, right? So, we talked about a technology. We talked about Aquarius with a technology. We're going into the age of Aquarius, which is a lot of technology. And what's one of the things that we've been seeing with all of this technology everywhere? We're talking about Big Brother, cameras in every corner, the fact that anything you said has an ancient footprint, and we're going to expose the truth because you can't hide it anymore. You said something in 2013 that was racist, and we know about it now, and we're going to punish you for it, because Saturn does has a bit of a karma, associated with it. And the other thing is because of this entering into the age, recently there's been a lot of astrological happenings that the great astrologers have been talking about. One of my favorites, is obviously Devi has been great, and Crossi is another one that I think is really fantastic, and Crossi Atasio. And the other one, Astro Devi 33. There's multitudes of them. Saturn's got a lot of recent major placements where he's a big player in the world right now, and you're seeing that because governments are out of control, corporations are out of control, and you feel repressed. You feel like you don't really have freedom. And it's ironic considering Aquarius, for example, is actually associated with rebellion and freedom. But maybe it's because Saturn oppresses you so much that you end up wanting to kind of create that freedom. But you're seeing that. This is why he's so important. This is why so many discussions about what's happening in the world today inevitably come back to the essence of what Saturn tends to do and tends to be. So, in order to really understand that, we really need to understand the key points of his myth. And I think first and foremost, understand that he actually presided over a golden age. When Saturn first established his rulership, he established a rulership where people were equal. People were, people had access to everything. There wasn't really a lot of differentiation between people. It's always viewed as a golden age. Now, whether or not it was truly a golden age, I personally wonder when I dig deeper into it. It might have just been a golden age simply because that's all people were allowed to say, right? When nobody's allowed to criticize government, when nobody's allowed to criticize the power of government, maybe, just maybe, that it seems like a golden age, but everyone's repressed. I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. But regardless, it's a common refrain that he presided over a golden age. And like I said before, as time went on, he was warned of his overthrow. He started to eat his children to present it, and it was his child Zeus, or Jupiter, who burst through it. It's also the reason why Saturn is Saturn's natural enemy in the as far as the broader planets are concerned is usually Jupiter, and that's why when Jupiter and Saturn meet, that kind of dictates what's going to happen for the next 20 years, because the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is considered the grand conjunction, and whatever sign and degree that it's in is, determines what happens. But as I've been saying, this part here, warned of his overthrow and aid his children to prevent it. Governments are supposed to give their power to the next generation. Governments are supposed to give their power and give up their power. Corporations are supposed to inevitably give up their power to the next group that comes in. But Saturn never likes doing that. And so what Saturn tends to do is Saturn tends to become oppressive. Eating your children is a representation of something that shouldn't be happening, but he did it anyway because he wants to hold on to it. And you're seeing that in the world today with our governments. It's regardless of what you feel about any one particular event when it comes down to our governments and our institutions, we all don't really trust what's going on. We don't feel like it's being done in good faith, because there is a shift that's going on in this world. Once that shift occurs, we might actually have a golden age again, right? Because the spirit of Saturn will always be the spirit of government. It will always be the spirit of order. It will always be the spirit of the broader and greater aspects of these particular houses, right? Like, it's not as though Jupiter becomes the new king and Jupiter becomes the ruler of the 10th sign and Jupiter becomes the ruler of the 11th. He never does. Instead, what happens is there is a bit of a reset. And Saturn himself, and I don't really say it here, is actually, also represented with a renewal that occurs. And by the way, it's the reason why, all of these myths are so difficult to understand, because they all happen at once. Saturn is the Lord of Time and Karma and ruler of the weak and the infirm, but he is also the one that presides over a golden age, right? He can be both of those things, even though they're seemingly contradictory, right? So, it's. I wanted to talk about this. It's a big, big, broad subject. I'm really not talking enough about the fact that he is also the malefic, the greater malefic at that. But I mean, again, all of these videos are here to kind of pepper you with some interesting information. Kind of just let this sit in the back of your mind. But if you have any questions, feel free to comment. I'm dying to hear what people think at some point, but that's okay. I might have to do some edits. I also might be really lazy, and I might not edit it. So I might just leave some of the interruptions in there. But all right, that's what I have for now. Hopefully we can, this... gets you to understand governments and corporations and Saturn and its relationship to the people a bit more. So